Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu einer weiteren Folge Witch on the Holy Night. Wir hatten ja den Kampf zwischen Alice und Toko gehabt. Und nach dem Kampf hat Toko bemerkt, dass Alices Körper offenbar überall mit Runen mit Magic Crest übersät war. Und ja, jetzt sind wir halt an dem Punkt der Magic Quest der Aosakis. The Magic Quest Toko referred to where the inheritance of the Aosaki family passed down by their ancestors. They can only be inherited. Toko had received the ones that were meant for Toko.
しかし、それも良し悪しだな。右腕に刻印をした青子の痛みは、残る人間の体と神秘となった右腕とが反発する程度だ。通常の肉体が右腕を否定し、抹消にかかる痛み。精神的にも肉体的にも生じる幻痛は現在にも似て拭い去ることはできない。だがここまで来ると痛みも何もあるまい。そもそも生きている実感はあるのか？自分が人間だとまだ信じている？ああ、本当にお互い非凡な死を持つと苦労するね、アリス。
Toko took Alice's body in her arms. The ones from Beowulf had mostly healed. Even so, her breathing was shallow, likely due to the pain. Toko gently held the girl's face in her hand.
マインスターには恩がある。それに、私の相手はあくまで青子一人だ。
Wahrscheinlich irgendwie Heilmittel oder sonstiges. Alice lungs sprained for oxygen. Toko pressed her lips to hers. The young girl wriggled, trying to escape, but Toko held her firmly. Beneath the blue moon, the two remained frozen. Then the sound of swallowing. Something solid slid down Alice's throat. With that, she went limp and her arm fell. After setting Alice down on her side, Toko stood up.
今のは七かまどに手を加えた私の特製品だ。そう簡単に解毒はできない。魔力を流せば体の中で暴発する仕組みになっているから気をつけなさい。ああ、口移しは私の趣味だから。特に気にすることはないよ。
As she desperately clung to consciousness, Alice looked up at Toko from the ground. The disgrace from the kiss was greater than the pain she felt in her body. Toko began walking away, her golden wolf in tow. Neither looked back to see Alice's hateful glare.
そうそう。一つ言い忘れていた。ベオが呼び寄せた野犬たちだけどね。公園の外にまだ山ほどいるんだが、困ったことに彼らは本来何を口にするべきかを思い出している。ベオの野生に刺激されたんだろう。獣はより強い獣に従うものだからな。
In a roundabout way, Toko had read Alice her last rites. In nature, it was common for the weak that could no longer move to offer their bodies up to feed the strong.
じゃあ、私は行くよ。歩くことも満足にできないだろうが、無事に帰れるといいね。
With a twisted grin, the mage headed into the darkness. As her footstep faded, the sound of groans grew louder. Alice could still barely focus her eyes. The hounds looked like monsters out of a picture book. Alice took a deep breath, her consciousness slipping away. The sky was blue, the trees were tall, the park was a graveyard. In the corner of her eyes, though, Alice could just about make out a solitary phone booth. The phone rang. It was the second time so she had heard its voice echo through the cold fire. Only a few minutes had passed since Alice called. He wondered what she could want this time. The call persisted, determined not to leave him to his thoughts.
はい、クオンジですが。
あら、その声は宗十郎くん
Ichie was such had been expecting Alice. It was Toko Aozaki, somehow Sochi was not surprised.
そうですけど、トウコさん、 暇なんですか?
He checked the time. He thought it was about midnight by now. No matter what the situation, Sojo always kept his cool. He could hear Toko trying to suppress a laugh. After taking a while to compose herself, she started talking again.
ごめんなさい。ちょっとツボ入っちゃったみたい。で、質問の開始ね。これがあんまり暇じゃないな。私も今日で終わらせる予定だから忙しいんだ。
偶然ですね。青崎もそんなことを言ってました。
やっぱりそうね。こういう時は本当に姉妹だなって思うわ。昔からエンジンかけるタイミングだけは一緒だったから、あのことは。ところで、青崎はやめてって言ったでしょ。私も青崎だからくすぐったいのよね。
Sojo realized she was probably right. Azaki's word made more sense now.
まあそんなわけだから長話をする気はないんだ。単刀直入に聞くけど。
It almost sounded like she was worried about her sister's whereabouts, but the cool-headed Sojo had not forgotten Toko was the enemy. Keeping Aoko and Alice in mind, he decided to be evasive.
なんて答えてほしいんですか、トウコさんとしては。
The question shifted in the tone of the conversation drastically. Sojo could hear Toko muttering to herself in annoyance. Shotaro was proving more quick-witted than she had anticipated. A change of tack was required.
そうね。君には何も答えてほしくないっていうのが正解かな。第一印象で君を無視するのは良くない気がしてたけど、やっぱり私は宗十郎君を手にかけたくはないみたい。君はこのまま無関係でいてちょうだいね。
Her warning came from the heart. Sojo responded flatly once again, not giving any sign in either way. It seems she wanted him to stay out of this too. Even Sojo could tell the girls were being kind in their own way. But who asked for the kindness?
じゃあ、さよならね。私は君が思ってるほど暇じゃないから。でも、最後に一つだけ。君を試すようで悪いんだけど、伝えておかないと一生恨まれそうだし。なんで、そうならないように、責任の半分を君に押し付けちゃおうかな。
Toko giggled, a laugh to show she had him in the palm of her hand from the
さっ
beginning.
きクオンジさんに会ってきたの。彼女から電話があったでしょ。
Her tone had not changed. She sounded as cordial as before. Even so, as soon as Sojo had an a chill ran up his spine.
今ひどい状態なんだ。満足に歩けないどころか、体中の刻印が活性化して破裂寸前。まあ、ともかくだ。いつ気を失ってもおかしくない状態なんだけど、災難なことに怖い野犬に囲まれてるみたいなの。個人的な意見だけど、10分もあれば骨しか残らない結末になるでしょうね。
She spoke as if she was telling a joke. If it was a joke, it was in bad taste. However, Sojo knew this was anything but. She was telling the truth. He had not heard of dogs attacking anyone in town, but the noise he heard were on the phone with Alice suddenly made sense. Dogs, a pack of them, no doubt about it. They were surrounding their prey. Why had he not cottoned on sooner? Squeezing the receiver in his hand, Sojo cursed himself. Alice had been calling for help. Even when backed into a corner, she had not wanted to involve Sojo. Still, she needed help. The way she had said his name so lightly. He spoke abruptly. Even though he knew Toko was the enemy, he was conflicted she would answer him. That was the reason she called.
教えてあげてもいいけど、そうした瞬間に、君は私の敵になるのよ。その覚悟はある？
Sojo realized what was happening. He was being tested. By ignoring Alice, he would be confirming that he did not want to get involved. But if he decided to save her... Sojo ignored Toko's question. Of course, he was not prepared to become an enemy, but he was even less prepared to let Alice die. He had lost his ability to think sensibly. Not that he was particularly good about that to begin with. Still, he would not waste any time in deliberation. He would simply go with his instincts. It was one of the few times he had felt pride since coming down from the mountains.
そう。ちょっと残念だな。私は本当に君が気に入ってたのに、 まあこうなることは分かってたけどね。場所はヤシロギの森林公園。受話器の下に地図があるでしょ。この前帰りがけにしおりを挟んでおいたから、それを参考にすること。繰り返すようだけど、10分持てば幸運。その後は1分ごとに奇跡の価値が上がるような状況よ。
As he listened, Sojo's expression turned to one of irritation. Misaki and Yashirogi were one station apart. How long would it take to get to the station from the mansion? Usually just under 12 minutes. But the time he got off from the train, Yashirogi, nearly 30 minutes would have
地
passed.
図の上じゃ近いのに、区画整理された交通手段は不便よね。けど、急げば最終の電車には間に合うわ。どっちにしたって。後悔のないようにね。
The line went dead. Sojo, not Toko, had hung up on the phone. He memorized the map and then made for the door. With no time to grab his coat, he ran out into the snow winter night with the clothes he had on. All that remained in the hall was the discarded map. It showed Misaki City. It was about 10 miles from the mansion to the nature park. 5 if you went in a straight line, but the streets were not that forgiving. 4 inches on the map, but so much farther in reality. For the first time, Sojo cursed the town. Alice's injuries were not limited to her abdomen. The wolf had punched a hole straight through to her back, crushing her lower vertebrae and leaving both of her legs paralyzed. Though her magic crest were repairing the damage, it would like to take another hour before recovery. At the very least, he heard her heart and slender arms will still work. Also, after crawling along the ground to the phone booth, those two were failing here. As the crest healed her wounds, the searing heat ran through her body that threatened to overwhelm her. It was as if her body was no longer her own, like she was transforming into another creature. The poison flowing through her open wounds hurt emotionally more than physically. She was used to pain, but she could not accept this disquieting feeling. Not that she had any intention to. The moment she did, it would be her last. Alice wrestled with the discomfort from her abdomen and her magic crest, and with her consciousness holding on by a thread, she took the phone in her hand. It was unlikely Aoko would be there to pick up. Even so, with the stray dogs gathering around the booth, she had to try. It was Sojo who picked up. Alice knew she was better off just hanging up, but his name slipped out of her mouth. After pausing and fighting with herself for some time, an image of the innocent boy came to mind and she hung up. Her instincts had worn out. She could not let him get involved. And not just because he was an innocent bystander, it was more than that. To Alice, Sojo appeared that day because he was merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. Only the lightest of breaths passed her lips. Above her, the moon began to blur. She was falling again, so close yet so far. The dogs began hurling themselves at the phone booth to the chorus of hungry snarls. Funk, funk. She took one last deep breath and closed her eyes. Glass, an unusual material for a coffin. But the girl knew in some corner of her mind that she had made the right choice not to ask the boy for help. Some time passed. A peculiar sight came into view. A field of wildflowers. The clear sky was too blue. The flowers so numerous they made the field look barren. The sight was so dazzlingly beautiful she wished she could look away. This was probably all thanks to Father Winter. The cold wind carried a scent of a paradise far removed, untainted by man or beast. It was a glimpse of the fields beyond winter. One could be forgiven for thinking they were the afterlife. Come to think of it, she remembered how funerals were sad, yet always beautiful. She cried. She made an incourageous whine, a sound of life. Her breathing was strained and erratic. Hollow and useless was the heart that she once used to fend off pain. It was as though she was in the space between disconnected body and mind. a crying woman, and the silent child. High was the sky, deep was the forest, unmoving were the people. No footsteps or voices of salvation came. Who was it looking innocently up at the sky in the stillness? When she came to, Alice was going up a familiar hill. The cold night air had all but frozen her hands or feet. She shook as you would expect from someone whose abdomen had been torn apart.
Cedric.
She could barely comprehend what she was being carried. That she was being carried slowly up Shiroi Nozuka. Oh. Soju had Alice on his back and was silently ascending the slope. His calm eyes seemed to be suffering from the bitter cold. He did not seem to be dressed for the time of year, not even a coat. His exposed neck and hands were ice cold. Alice asked, still slumped over his frame. She tried to move, but to no avail. The last thing she wanted was to rest her entire weight on someone else.
瞳子さんから電話があった。アリスが危ないって。青崎はともかく、アリスは意地を張りすぎだ。あの状況で助けを呼ばないのはどうかしてる。
Schulze spoke with a scolding tone, his eyes kept firmly ahead. His words were directed at himself rather than the girl on his back.
しずきくんは関係ないもの。
だろうね。けど、これで関係はできた。やか。
Oh fuck. Soju focused on climbing the hill. The slope would get steeper from here to the mansion. The thought of Soju climbing in the step hill with her on his back surprised Alice.
降りるわ。もう大丈夫だから。
Nein, you're not.
お腹をむき出しでかい。この方が少しは暖かいよ。それに、アリスは薪より軽い。山じゃこの程度は朝飯前だから気にしないでくれ。まあ、その意味はなかったんだが。
なぜ？
俺が着いたら犬はさっさと散っていった。初めから瞳子さんはそういうつもりだったんだ。アリスをどうにかするつもりもなければ時間制限もなかった。喜ぶべきことなんだろうけど。
Soju said dejectedly, but he was wrong. While Toko did not want to kill Alice per se, she would not have cared if she had died. At least that was the way Alice saw it. She did not know how long it took Soju to get to the park, but if he had not come, the phone booth would have collapsed and she would have been dead. Alice did her best to suppress her thoughts and feelings. She felt silly at the thought of correcting him, and it would matter little anyway. The thought of her trying to thank him was more painful than her open wounds.
もしかして公園からずっと。
仕方ないだろう。電車終わってたんだから。タクシーを使えばよかったんだけどあいにく持ち合わせがなくて。ほんと今日ほどお金の不便さを思い知った日はない。
For the first time today, Soju let out a sigh. There was no point taking a break. He had already traveled close to 6 miles like this. Perhaps the fatigue was getting to him. Soju was more upset with his own weakness than the difficulty of the trek.
でもそれを言うならお金の大切さ。
使えるものがあるのにお金がないだけで使えないんだから、それって不便って言わないか？
The innocence of his question made Alice briefly forget her pain. She too felt distance from the real world, but compared to the boy carrying her, she felt like a regular citizen.
何かあなたらしいわ。
Alice smiled to herself. As Alice rested her head, something soft touched her cheek. The collar Aoko had given him.
館に着いたら着替えるんだ。お腹の血も拭って。落ち着いたら居間で話そう。瞳子さんに言わせれば、俺もこれで敵らしいから。
With those words hanging in the air, they reached the top of the hill. The gate in the woods stood before them. Beyond it, illuminated by the pale moonlight, stood the mansion. Looking up at it, the girl felt a little disappointed. A naturally a natural reaction, yet she could not place where her sadness was coming from. Once they entered the mansion, Alice slid off Sojo's back and walked towards the west wing. The western wing was her domain. However, after only a few steps, she collapsed to the floor. Sojo rushed over to her help her, but she raised her hand. Her gesture told him he was not to come closer. He stopped in his tracks, a concerned look on his face. Her pale skin gleamed with sweat. Her expression uncharacteristically strained.
平気。部屋に戻るぐらいの力は戻ったわ。服を繕ってくるから、あなたはここにいて、すぐに戻ってくるから。そうしたら。
The pained look in Alice's eyes told Sojo they would talk later. He knew he could not stop her. Sojo reminded himself that she was the one in pain, not him.
それじゃあ、戻ってきたら話を聞かせてくれ。
Alice took a deep breath before slowly disappearing down the corridor. An uneventful 5 minutes passed. Alice returned wearing a fresh set of black clothes, but her complexion remained pallid. With a small sigh, she carefully leaned against a pillar on the foyer and slid down it until she was sitting.
アリス、傷が痛むなら無理せず横になった方がいい。
Sojo sat across from her on the cold floor.
傷はもう痛まないわ。横になる必要もない。この体の異常は七かまどを飲まされたせいだから。
じゃあ、せめて毛布とか。
いいから、気遣いはしないで。
She seemed to be telling the truth. Sojo remembered Aoko telling him that as long as Alice is inside the mansion, she would be comfortable.
あったかいのならいい。それで、七かまどっていうのは
薬草の一種よ。7回かまどで焼いても燃え残ることから付けられた名前で、紅葉は魔除け。普通の人には良くない程度だけど、私や青子には少し厄介ね。体内での魔力生成そのものに抵抗されてしまうから手の打ちようがない。
毒と思っていいのか。
いえ、本来は薬草よ。今は傷を治すために魔力を使っているから苦しいけど、傷が完治すればおとなしくなるわ。魔術さえ使わなければ七かまども反応しないから。単純な話、七かまどを消化するまで私は役には立たないだけ。
Alice paused. She decided not to say how many days that would take.
別にしずきくんが心配することじゃないわ。こんなの血が流れる程度の痛みだから。
She worked hard to keep her tone calm. Aoko had barely blinked when she was struck in the back, so mages must have an unusual high pain threshold. Sojo was surprised and bewildered by what she said. If wounds didn't count as long as the pain wasn't too bad, then nothing would hurt except an injury that killed you.
わかった。話をするのは明日にしよう。今日はとにかく体を休めてほしい。
明日になっても私。
いいんだ、それでも。アリスはもっと体を大事にしてくれ。
He stood up.
部屋まで送るよ。それとも今で休むか？西館には入ったことはないから、アリスの部屋もわからないし。
ここでいいわ。青子を待たなくちゃいけないから。
Alice looked up at the skylight. The moonlight illuminated her pained face. The foyer looked like it belonged to a run-down castle. Only the moon and Alice seemed more vivid than reality. Where did her strength come from? Sojo stared at her. Without understanding the significance of Alice's gaze, he turned his gaze to the night sky, powerless as it was. For the third time that night, the silence was broken by the sound of the phone ringing. Before Sojo could move, a thin shadow bolted across the foyer. By the time he realized it was the weakened Alice, she had hardly taken the receiver in her hand. She had already taken.
Aoko.
It was the first time Sojiro had heard Alice's sound concerned. Her tone was infinitely graver than when she was enduring her own pain. Alice's question received only a short response from the voice on the other end. It was a voice, more frail than Alice's, like a flickering flame about to turn to smoke.
ごめん、やられた。
Okay. The phone was far from Sojiro's ears, but the words she picked up were very unlike her, despite saying so little no, because she had said so little. The weight of Aoko's defeat struck Sojiro hard. Alice silently set the receiver down. Only moments before, her body had been fighting the pain, now it felt stronger than ever. It was like a scarecrow transforming into a beautiful stone statue. Seeing this, Sojiro finally understood. Alice's expression when she looked at the moon had come from her trying to accept an immutable reality. Okay. Also ich würde dann tatsächlich auch sagen, dass ich dann an dem Punkt... Okay. Hier, da ist eine Lücke. Da ist eine Lücke, die triggert mich gerade. Wieso ist da eine verdammte Lücke? Da muss doch irgendwas drinstehen. Ah. Wenn ich mir das so anschaue, glaube ich, dass noch 2 Kapitel übrig sind. Das hier ist komplettes. Aber ich würde dann tatsächlich sagen, dass ich an dem Punkt jetzt diese Folge beende, bevor ich mit der nächsten weitermache. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao.